When Marcus Johnson stepped up to the podium and said 7 words that would change everything, nobody in the Family Feud studio was prepared for what came next. But it wasn't just what he said that stopped Steve Harvey mid-sentence. It was the way he said it, with the quiet certainty of someone who'd already made peace with tomorrow not being guaranteed. The cameras kept rolling, but this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was the moment when a 19-year-old boy taught a television studio full of adults what it really means to live while you're alive. Tuesday afternoon at the Family Feud studios in Atlanta began like countless others before it. The Johnson family from Memphis faced off against the Rodriguez family from San Antonio. But there was something different about the energy surrounding the Johnson family, something that the production crew couldn't quite identify but felt nonetheless. Marcus Johnson, 19 years old with an easy smile and eyes that seemed older than his years, stood at the end of the family podium wearing a simple blue polo shirt that concealed more than it revealed. Next to him stood his mother, Patricia Johnson, 47, a nurse whose steady hands had comforted countless patients but sometimes trembled when she looked at her son. His father, Robert Johnson, 49, a mechanic whose strong back had carried the weight of family responsibility for decades, kept one protective hand near Marcus's shoulder. Completing the family was Marcus's grandmother, Dorothy Johnson, 71, whose faith had been tested by loss but never broken. What the studio audience couldn't see, couldn't know, was the scar that ran down the center of Marcus's chest, hidden beneath that blue polo. They couldn't know about the pacemaker that regulated his heartbeat, or the medical appointments that punctuated his calendar like reminders of mortality. They couldn't know that 5 years earlier, doctors had given this family news that no parent should ever have to hear. At 14, Marcus had been a typical teenager, star player on his middle school basketball team, honor roll student, the kind of kid who made his parents beam with pride at parent-teacher conferences. But during what should have been a routine physical, a doctor's stethoscope had picked up something irregular. A heart murmur that led to tests, tests that led to specialists, specialists that led to a diagnosis that changed everything. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, the same condition that had taken Marcus's older brother Michael when Marcus was only 7 years old. Michael had been everything Marcus aspired to be. 5 years older, charismatic, athletic, the kind of big brother who made you feel invincible just by claiming you as family. Michael had collapsed during basketball practice on a Tuesday afternoon, his heart simply stopping without warning. The family had been told it was a tragic anomaly, a 1 in a million occurrence that wouldn't repeat itself. They were wrong. When Marcus received the same diagnosis at 14, the genetic component became clear. The Johnson family carried a silent predator in their DNA, a condition that could remain dormant for years or strike without warning. Marcus's heart, like his brother's, was a ticking clock with no visible timer. The years since diagnosis had been a careful balance of living and monitoring. Regular cardiology appointments, activity restrictions, medications that reminded Marcus daily that his body required maintenance most teenagers never considered. He'd had to give up basketball, the sport he'd loved, the sport that had connected him to Michael's memory. But he'd found other ways to honor his brother's legacy. Marcus had become an advocate for heart health awareness, speaking at schools about the importance of cardiac screenings. He'd volunteered at children's hospitals, bringing comfort to kids facing their own medical battles. Most importantly, he'd learned to live with intention, understanding that every day was both a gift and a gamble. The Family Feud opportunity had come through Dorothy, his grandmother, who'd submitted their application with a simple note: "My grandson is living proof that miracles come with expiration dates. He deserves to feel like a normal teenager for one day." The producers had been moved by the family's story during the interview process, but they'd also been struck by Marcus's maturity, his perspective, his ability to find joy despite carrying such a heavy burden. The trip to Atlanta had been Marcus's idea of perfect normalcy. For 2 days, he wasn't the kid with the heart condition. He was just a teenager on a family adventure, excited about being on television, joking with his parents, feeling like any other 19-year-old. During family introductions, Steve had approached them with his signature warmth. "The Johnson family from Memphis, y'all ready to play?" Robert stepped forward as the family spokesperson. "We're ready, Steve. This is my wife Patricia, my mother Dorothy, and my son Marcus." Steve knelt down slightly to address Marcus, though at 19 he was nearly Steve's height. "Marcus, you look like you're ready to bring home some money for the family." Marcus smiled, that easy grin that had always been his defense against life's heavier moments. "Yes, sir, Mr. Harvey. We're going to do our best." Something in Marcus's demeanor caught Steve's attention. There was a groundedness to him, a presence that seemed unusual for someone his age. But the show moved forward, and the moment passed into the rhythm of Family Feud. The game progressed smoothly through the first 4 rounds. The Johnson family was playing strong, matching the Rodriguez family point for point. Marcus had buzzed in twice, giving solid answers that earned approving nods from Steve and cheers from his family. He seemed to be thriving in the spotlight, his natural charisma shining through. During commercial breaks, production assistants noticed the family's protective dynamic around Marcus. Patricia would check on him frequently, asking if he needed water or if he was feeling okay. Robert kept a watchful eye, the kind of parental vigilance that suggested experience with medical emergencies. Dorothy would squeeze Marcus's hand during tense moments, as if she could transfer her strength to him through touch. But it was during the 5th round, during Fast Money, that everything changed. Marcus had been selected to go second for Fast Money after his father Robert had posted a respectable 134 points. Marcus needed 66 points to win the $20,000 grand prize, a total that seemed well within reach given his performance throughout the game. Steve approached Marcus at the podium with his usual Fast Money energy. "Marcus, my man, you need 66 points to win $20,000 for your family. You feeling confident?" Marcus nodded, but something had shifted in his expression. The studio lights seemed brighter suddenly, the audience louder, the weight of the moment more significant than just a game show. "I'm ready, Mr. Harvey," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "All right, here we go. 20 seconds on the clock. Name something people do when they're happy." "Dance," Marcus replied quickly. "Good answer. Name something you find in a doctor's office." "Stethoscope." "Name something people do when they're nervous." Marcus paused for just a moment. "Pray." "Good answer. Name something you save money for." "College," Marcus responded. "Excellent. Last question, Marcus. Name something you want to do before you die." The question hung in the air like a challenge. For most 19-year-olds, it would be a hypothetical, something distant and abstract. For Marcus, it was intimate, immediate, real. He looked directly at Steve, then toward the camera that would broadcast this moment to millions. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to age him years in seconds. "Make my brother proud in heaven." The studio fell completely silent. Not the polite quiet of a commercial break, but the profound silence of 300 people suddenly understanding they had just heard something sacred. Steve's mouth fell slightly open. In decades of hosting, through thousands of answers, he had never heard a response that cut so directly to the heart of what it means to be human. "Make your brother proud in heaven," Steve repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of the words. Marcus nodded, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "My brother Michael died when I was 7. Same heart condition I have now. Every day I wake up, I try to live in a way that would make him proud." The revelation hit the studio like a physical force. Patricia Johnson brought her hands to her mouth, not because she was surprised by Marcus's words, but because she hadn't expected him to share their family's deepest pain on national television. Steve set down his cards and walked closer to Marcus. "Marcus, tell me about your brother." What happened next would transform the show completely. "Michael was everything I wanted to be," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. 5 years older, basketball star. Everybody loved him. He died during practice one day. His heart just stopped. Marcus paused, gathering strength for what came next. "When I was 14, doctors told us I have the same condition, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. They said I might have 5 years, might have 50. Nobody knows." The studio was completely silent now. Even the production crew had stopped their usual bustling activity. "So every morning I wake up," Marcus continued, "I ask myself, what would Michael do today? How can I make him proud? How can I live enough life for both of us?" Steve Harvey, who had spent his career managing timing and maintaining energy, found himself completely off script. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a 19-year-old boy teaching a television studio about courage. "Marcus," Steve said softly, "how long have you been living with this?" 5 years, Marcus replied. 5 years of knowing that my heart could stop tomorrow, or it could keep beating for decades. 5 years of learning that the question isn't how long you live, it's how much life you put into your days." Behind the cameras, seasoned crew members were wiping their eyes. This wasn't just good television. This was a masterclass in resilience, in finding meaning despite uncertainty. Steve looked at Patricia and Robert, whose faces showed the particular kind of pride that comes from raising a child who transforms suffering into wisdom. "Stop the clocks," Steve called out, his voice carrying across the studio with unprecedented authority. "Stop everything." The fast money timer froze. The studio music cut out. The audience held its collective breath. Steve walked to the center of the stage, positioning himself so he could address the entire studio. "Ladies and gentlemen," Steve began, his voice carrying a weight that transformed the atmosphere. "We just heard something extraordinary, not just an answer to a game show question, but a life philosophy that most of us spend decades trying to understand." He gestured toward Marcus. "This young man is 19 years old, and he's been living with the knowledge that his time might be shorter than most. But instead of letting that knowledge destroy him, he's let it teach him. He's learned something that all of us need to hear." Steve's voice grew stronger, more passionate. "Marcus Johnson is living proof that life isn't about how many days you get, it's about what you do with the days you have. And he's spending his days trying to make a brother in heaven proud." The audience began to respond, but Steve wasn't finished. "Marcus," Steve said, turning to face him directly, "I need you to know something. Your brother Michael isn't just proud of you. He's in awe of you, because you took the worst thing that could happen to a family and turned it into the best reason to live fully." Marcus was crying now, tears he'd been holding back not just through the show, but through 5 years of medical appointments and uncertain tomorrows. Steve reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his personal business card. "Marcus," he said, "I want you to have this, because what you just shared with us, that's not just television, that's ministry. That's teaching. That's exactly the kind of message this world needs to hear." But Steve wasn't done. He began removing his suit jacket, the gesture that had become his signature in moments of profound connection. "This jacket," Steve said, draping it around Marcus's shoulders, "has been with me through thousands of shows, but today it goes home with someone who understands what it really means to live." The jacket hung perfectly on Marcus's frame, but it seemed to transform him, giving him the appearance of someone older, someone who had earned the right to wear symbols of achievement. Steve turned to address the entire studio again. "You know what we're going to do? We're going to finish this fast money round, and we're going to see how Marcus did. But I already know he won because he just taught all of us how to win at life." The points were revealed one by one. "Make my brother proud in heaven" had earned 28 points for something you want to do before you die, bringing Marcus's total to 168 points. Combined with his father's 134, they had 302 points, well over the 200 needed to win. The Johnson family had won the $20,000, but the victory felt secondary to what had just happened. As confetti fell and celebration music played, Steve gestured for both families to come to center stage. The Rodriguez family joined the Johnsons without hesitation, understanding that they had been part of something larger than competition. "Today," Steve announced, "there are no losers. Both families are taking home the grand prize. Because both families just participated in something more important than any game. We just learned what it means to live with purpose." Steve knelt down next to Marcus one more time. "Marcus, what you said today about making your brother proud, that's going to help a lot of people understand something important. That the best way to honor the people we've lost is to live the fullest life possible." Marcus looked up at him, still wrapped in Steve's jacket. "Mr. Harvey," he said quietly, "can I tell you something?" "Anything, son." "I used to be angry about my heart condition, mad that I got the same thing that killed Michael. But today, standing here, I realized something. Maybe I got this condition not as punishment, but as a reminder. A reminder to live every day like it matters, because it does." The wisdom in those words, coming from someone who had learned to find meaning in uncertainty, left everyone in the studio speechless. Behind the cameras, the production crew was experiencing something unprecedented. Veteran workers who had seen hundreds of episodes found themselves profoundly moved by this young man's perspective on life and death. Steve stood slowly, his own eyes glistening. "Marcus, you just said something that's going to change how a lot of people think about their own lives." As the show concluded, something remarkable happened. Members of the studio audience began approaching Marcus, not for autographs or selfies, but to share their own stories of loss, of medical struggles, of learning to live with uncertainty. Marcus's openness had created a safe space for others to acknowledge their own mortality and their own need to find meaning in limited time. One woman, tears streaming down her face, approached Marcus during the post-show meet and greet. "My husband died of a heart attack last year," she said quietly. I've been so angry, so focused on what was taken away. But listening to you, seeing how you've chosen to live, it reminds me that he would want me to find joy again." A teenager with visible scars on his arms approached nervously. "I've been battling cancer for 2 years," he said. "Sometimes I wonder if it's worth fighting. But hearing you talk about living for your brother, it makes me want to keep fighting. Not just to survive, but to really live." The episode that aired 3 months later became one of the most impactful in Family Feud history, not because of dramatic moments or unexpected answers, but because of the profound life lesson delivered by a 19-year-old who had learned to measure life not in years, but in meaning. The response was overwhelming. The show received over 300,000 messages from viewers sharing their own stories of loss, of medical challenges, of learning to live with uncertainty. Heart health organizations reported increased awareness in donations. Organ donation registries saw significant upticks in registration. But perhaps the most powerful response came from young people who saw themselves in Marcus's story. Teenagers and young adults facing their own health challenges, their own mortality, suddenly had a role model who showed them that limitation doesn't have to mean limitation of spirit. Steve Harvey said in interviews that Marcus's episode changed how he understood courage. "I met a young man that day who was facing the biggest challenge any of us can face, our own mortality, and he was doing it with more grace and wisdom than most people twice his age," he explained. The jacket Steve gave Marcus hangs in his bedroom, next to a photo of Michael and a photo from that day at Family Feud. But the real change wasn't in what Marcus received that day. It was in what he gave to everyone watching. Marcus is still living, still thriving, still using his platform to advocate for heart health awareness and organ donation. He started a foundation in Michael's name that provides support for families dealing with genetic heart conditions. He's studying to become a nurse, inspired by his mother's example and his own experience as a patient. The business card Steve gave him sits framed on his desk, not because he's needed to use it, but because it represents something powerful, the moment when his private struggle became a public inspiration, when his personal pain became a universal lesson. Every year on the anniversary of Michael's death, Marcus posts a photo on social media. Sometimes it's of him volunteering at the hospital, sometimes it's of him speaking at schools, sometimes it's just of him living a normal day. The caption is always the same: "Still making you proud, big brother." But the most powerful testament to Marcus's impact isn't in social media posts or foundation work. It's in the thousands of people who watched that episode and decided to live more fully, love more deeply, and appreciate more completely the gift of each day. The lesson Marcus taught that Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta is profound. Life isn't about the number of heartbeats you're guaranteed. It's about making sure that each heartbeat counts, that each day serves a purpose, that each moment honors those who can no longer have moments. And sometimes it takes a 19-year-old boy with a borrowed heart and an unshakable spirit to remind a television studio full of adults that the best way to face an uncertain future is to live a meaningful present. The story continues to inspire, not because it offers false hope or easy answers, but because it demonstrates that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to live fully despite fear. Marcus Johnson didn't ask for a genetic condition that threatens his life, but he chose what to do with that reality. He chose to make his brother proud. He chose to help others facing similar challenges. He chose to transform his medical appointments into opportunities for advocacy. He chose to live not as a victim of circumstances, but as a guardian of Michael's memory and a teacher for anyone struggling to find meaning in suffering. That's the legacy of Marcus Johnson. That's the power of choosing purpose over despair, meaning over self-pity, service over surrender. That's what happens when a game show becomes a classroom and a 19-year-old becomes a teacher for anyone willing to learn. Because in the end, life isn't about how much time we have, it's about what we do with the time we're given. And Marcus Johnson is living proof that even uncertain time can be filled with certain purpose, that even borrowed days can be invested in eternal significance.